Hello, everybody. Um, as you may have noticed from my Instagram feed, I just did this. I've been doing these Zoom seminars, but just did a Bordeaux seminar day before yesterday on Thursday, and it was great. And I'm still all fired up about Bordeaux because Bordeaux is interesting and has all this crazy history, and it's exciting. And Bordeaux produces a lot of interesting wine, and also because Bordeaux sort of has an image problem. Bordeaux is like a victim of its own success in defining what Bordeaux is and stuff, and like the world has moved on and people just see Bordeaux as being this very stuffy, proper, fine wine, precious, tweed, sport-coated, elderly gentleman with elbow patches and mustaches like this and stuff like that. Actually, not mustaches like this, probably better kept mustaches than mine. Anyway, Bordeaux kind of has an image problem. People overlook it. People write it off. As I was putting together this wine seminar, it occurred to me that I drink more Chilean Pais than I drink Bordeaux, which, considering that Bordeaux is basically the most famous wine appellation in the world, that's crazy. That somebody who owns and runs a wine company, and I'm a wine professional and stuff, should I call myself a wine influencer? Not going to go there yet. Anyway, that I drink so little Bordeaux, that I primarily drink, like Chilean Pais and I don't know, other wacky stuff like that. Anyway, so I want to talk about this Pentimento. This is a Cotes de Castillon Bordeaux made by Michel Dupree. You're going to get around to that. Also, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Bordeaux because, so the video of the seminar, which Michel was a part of, it was a lot of us discussing Bordeaux and back and forth, talking about the history. That's up on here on the YouTube channel. Oh, well, on the YouTube channel. This is Instagram Live right now. But that's an hour and a half long, and not everybody is going to watch that. A large portion of that is us drinking wines and tasting them and stuff. So anyway, Bordeaux. Bordeaux is Atlantic coast of France. It's down by Gascony and stuff. It is. It's a relatively northern wine region. It's certainly farther south than like the Loire and stuff, but it is more northern, cooler, and more temperate than like the Rhone, than the Languedoc, and obviously certainly all of Italy. So it's not necessarily the easiest place to ripen red grapes. So like Cabernet Sauvignon that Bordeaux is so famous for is actually sort of hard to ripen in Bordeaux. It's that windy that the wind just blew my phone over. Bordeaux is a part of the Aquitaine, and Bordeaux is one of the largest. It's a great natural port. It's an estuary. The Garonne and the Dordogne River flow into the Garonne and Dordogne flow into the Gironde estuary and up and out into the Atlantic. So it is a great natural port, and it has basically always been a successful port and mercantile center, exporting agricultural produce from southwestern France up out to England, the Low Countries, like northern Germany, stuff like that, northern France, America, Canada. So culturally, that's what Bordeaux was. Winemaking wasn't huge in Bordeaux. There was wine shipping, but everything like what we think of as Bordeaux really starts in 1152 when Eleanor, Duchess of Aquitaine, marries Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy, who then inherits the English throne and becomes Henry II. And so Aquitaine, where Bordeaux is, becomes an English possession and is actually a possession of the English crown for something like the next 400 years until, I forget, is it Henry the VI that loses it? It's right after Henry V and Agincourt. It's like the next generation, basically. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But anyway, so, all of the Norman nobility in England suddenly, like, this is where they're going to get their wine from. And it jumpstarts, it supercharges wine export and then also wine production from Bordeaux. But the merchants in Bordeaux, they're not just growing their own grapes and making wine, they're merchants. They're buying wine from other parts of France, the southwest, from like Cahors and stuff like that, in Madaran and wherever, and then blending it and shipping it and selling it under their own names, under the names of their merchant companies, to England or wherever. Probably selling it on to other merchants who then blend it again and bottle it and sell it under their own names. So anyway, it was very export-driven, market economics, even way back then, and it's interesting, very different from probably any other wine region back then. There was this real like market pressure to create brands. All those different merchants were trying to create their own brands to create a following, in their overseas export market and stuff, which creates a lot of market pressure and like pressure to continue innovating in order to justify charging more money, higher prices, making more money, which leads us to a very interesting thing. Bordeaux, the first English record of a wine from a single estate, a single chateau, being sold, exported and sold under its own name, under the name of the winery, is, oh man, I threw the paper away, 1663, I want to say. Samuel Pepys, famous English diarist, administrator of the Navy, actually very important in modernizing the English Navy, but also extremely important diarist. In his diary in 1663, I want to say it was a day in April, he went to the Royal Oak Tavern, Royal Oak, and had a French wine called O'Brien, which had a particular and most enjoyable taste that he hath never had. O'Brien being Aubryon estate in Graves, which even back then in 1663 was making wine that was so special that it was being exported and sold in England under its own name, under the name of the winery. Aubryon went on to become a first growth in the classification of 1855. So, what did I just say? I just said a bunch of junk. Graves, 1855 classification. Bordeaux is an estuary. You have these rivers. They're broadly, generally speaking, people love talking about. There is the left bank, which is the Médoc, that's closer to the Atlantic, and then you have the right bank. When you're talking about right and left banks of rivers, the orientation is always the flow of the river. So the river is flowing northwest here. So the left bank over here and the right bank over there. On the left bank, it actually used to be a swamp until the 1700s when Dutch engineers came and drained it by digging drainage ditches. So it was a swamp. Then it got drained. There's a lot of gravel there. It's all alluvial, from the estuary. But there are these banks of gravel that were deposited by the river. And Cabernet Sauvignon has a very hard time ripening here because it's cold and rainy and damp, and it's the Atlantic. And in a lot of Bordeaux, there is clay, and clay is very cold and is a heat sink. Gravel, though, absorbs solar radiation, solar energy, heat from the sun, light from the sun, turns it into heat and reflects it back at the vine. So, if you want to ripen Cabernet Sauvignon in Bordeaux, you have to find soil that has a lot of gravel on it to absorb and reflect and get your Cabernet Sauvignon vines and grapes warm enough to fully ripen. Primarily, gravel like that is over on the left bank in the Médoc. So Médoc, and then sub-regions, Saint-Julien, Saint-Estèphe, Pauillac, Margaux, they are famous for gravel and producing Cabernet Sauvignon. The other region that has gravel and produces Cabernet Sauvignon is Graves. Graves is French for gravel, but unfortunately for Graves, Graves is right by the town of Bordeaux. Now, city of Bordeaux, and that is the problem, because originally it was a little town and they produced a whole lot of wine right there. It was fantastic gravel, great drainage, but the little town over centuries got bigger and bigger and bigger and grew up into a city. And basically, pretty much almost all of those vineyards got ripped out and turned into subdivisions and warehouses and stuff like that. There are only a few vineyards left there. Aubryon is one of them. because Aubryon is so fantastic and special that it would not be worth it to rip out this winery that's worth, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars easily, to have some crappy subdivisions. Anyway, then you have the right bank. Over on the right bank of the Dordogne River, that is Saint-Emilion and Pomerol are the two most famous appellations over there. But then you also have Blaye, Côte de Bourg, Cotes de Castillon, and then you have all these sort of like satellites of Saint-Emilion and Pomerol. So you have like Lalande de Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, Montagne Saint-Emilion, Saint-Emilion Puisquin, Fronsac, Canon Fronsac. Anyway, so that's right bank. Over there, there's not a lot of gravel. It's mostly clay and sand. Clay can be, it's cold, it's a heat sink. Over there, they grow earlier ripening grapes, grape varieties, primarily Merlot and Cabernet Franc, because Cabernet Sauvignon just doesn't ripen over there. But the best parts, so Merlot, in where it's just like deep clay, the Merlot, it gets ripe, but it doesn't have a lot of acidity, and you get these like solid, heavy, rich wines. But there are some places, there is a limestone ridge that runs down through Blaye, through Bourg. Bourg is actually very hilly. I keep reading about it being described as the Switzerland of Bordeaux because it's hilly, or the right bank, whatever. Anyway, through Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, and then over through Cotes de Castillon. There's this limestone ridge plateau. There are places where the topsoil, the clay, is very shallow, and then below that you have limestone. And particularly there are some places where the limestone is soft enough, tender enough, that the vine's roots can get into the limestone. And when that happens, it gives the vine more moisture, also acts as more of a heat sink, and it slows down the ripening process of the Merlot and the Cabernet Franc, and it keeps the acidity high even as the grapes get riper and riper and riper. And so you can have these like really rich, lush, juicy wines that are still vibrant and fresh and bright because they have great acidity. And this is one of them. This is Pentimento. This is a Merlot and Cabernet Franc 75-25 blend from Michelle Dupree, a woman from New York who is actually a professional winemaker now in Bordeaux. She's contracted by various wineries to like help them make wine, and she makes wine as well on her own. This is her own project. This is from Cotes de Castillon. She was making wine in an appellation of Saint-Emilion, but she actually moved over here to Castillon because it's a great place with great Côte de Bordeaux Contrôlée. So anyway, I'm gonna drink this now. Smells juicy, jammy, plummy. It has been open for 2 days. Disclaimer. It actually should be just about perfect now, because it was it actually has a lot of structure, but we'll get to that. There's dried fruit. There's like dried cherry, like black cherry, some like red currant, and also a little bit of spice, a little bit of like there's like aromatic. There's so much cherry, it's hard to get beyond that, but there's this like aromatic sort of like tarragon, or maybe like spicy basil. But the aroma is very fruit dominated. It smells lovely. It's fruit dominated, but like really expressive, like exuberant, like fresh fruit. Pretty powerful aroma. Lots of pigment to it too. It's very dark in the glass. This is 14.5% alcohol according to the label here, which I didn't know. I've been drinking this at the seminar, and then tasted it again last night, and I did not notice the alcohol. It's also pretty cold. from me standing out here for so long now. So that's unfortunate. It's cool. It really builds over the course of the palate. You get really pretty, like, red cherry, black raspberry, a little bit of like wild blueberry right up front. But there's nice acidity that underpins it because of the limestone, like, subsoil here. So you get this really fresh, like, really pretty, juicy, exuberant sort of fruit right up front at first. And then that builds and you get more sort of like on the mid palate, a little bit of like aromatic spice, like a hint of sort of like tobacco. And then the tannins come in and the finish gets like really more like serious, more powerful. The tannins aren't, at this point, they're not aggressive, but they're substantial, and they really like tie the wine together and carry the wine and draw out the finish. And then after the finish, really, like beyond the tannins, then there's this really cool sort of pretty, like elegant red cherry and sort of raspberry flavor that comes back. It's a pretty excellent Bordeaux that retails for, I want to say, under $30, right under $30, something like that. It's lovely. It would be a lot more lovely if it wasn't so cold now from me standing out here this long. But this is an excellent introduction to Bordeaux, to like serious, you know, like multi-layered, very expressive, delicious Bordeaux. That's good now. It's 2016, but it does actually really like have aging potential too. Drinking this, like this will get better over the coming years. This will be great. It'll just improve. It's good now. It will improve. It's primarily Merlot, and I know like people love to sort of look down on or whatever, ignore Merlot right now, but this is really excellent, serious, complex, lovely wine. Like this is a, to me, like as good as Merlot gets, and it's fantastic. Merlot like this is brilliant. I'm gonna take it inside and let it warm up now. Thanks for listening to me ramble about Bordeaux.